thing too. So, yeah, so I will, if you don't mind, I guess just introduce yourself and tell us if there possibly is someone living on the moon that doesn't know your connection to the cattle industry and your, just kind of briefly your story the last couple of years here, or a year.
Okay, my name is Heather Maude. My husband Charles and I farm and ranch in western South Dakota. We are the couple that the U.S. Forest Service brought criminal felony charges against in June of 2024, following 90 days, give or take, and one meeting with the management side of the Forest Service. They decided to pursue criminal felony charges against us, which has never been done before. And if you follow Tri-State Livestock News, you know they have covered this throughout the entire process. We really appreciate that. Now we are able to speak. We got the criminal charges dropped in April of 2025, and then found out in July of 2025 that the attempts at bringing a civil case against us had also been stopped. So from July until now, we have been focusing on resolving the actual issue of a fence built prior to 1953 and the fact that it is not on the actual boundary line between our private property and our U.S. Forest Service allotment. The agency has several options in place to resolve an issue like this. So we've worked directly with the chief of the Forest Service and our regional forester to work through those. We ended up settling on the Small Tracts Act, which allows us to buy those acres. And just this Monday, we received a purchase agreement from Chief Tom Schultz of the U.S. Forest Service to buy those acres. So we have been really busy up to this point, and it's just an overwhelming in the best possible way to be at this point where we have a purchase agreement to review. And after everything we've gone through, to see the actual resolution process occurring is such a blessing.
Awesome. Okay. So tell me, you are looking at purchasing a small amount of Forest Service land is essentially what's going on.
That is correct. So the Forest Service has some options when they find something like this. This is not uncommon. Fences in the West, as we've stated ever since I could speak, and I'm sure you did before, fences are put in practical locations where they can be built and maintained. And that is the case in our situation. A fence was put in a practical location, and our place has never sold. It has stayed within the family for 115 years now. So there was never a survey conducted as though you bought it from me to verify some of these boundary fences. So in that instance, one of the options the Forest Service has is to utilize what is called the Small Tracts Act to sell that to the adjoining landowner. So that is in essence what we are in the process of doing, is going through a land purchase, just like you would with anyone else. Upon receiving the purchase agreement, it went to a title company. We have met with our lender, and now we're going to send the purchase agreement to him to do what he needs to do with, and then we hope to sign it and become the owners of these two small government lots. That the fence is on these two government lots. It is not on the boundary line. So we are purchasing the two government lots that this fence goes across, and then that should complete the resolution component of our situation.
Okay. And so tell me, prior to your being alerted by a Forest Service investigator that in his opinion, there was an issue, what was the use of the land for decades? Yeah. The Maude family?
So my records indicate that we came to the area in 1907, and we purchased adjoining land to these two government lots in 1910. And from 1910 on, continuously, the Maude family has managed these acres that came into question in 2024. And they have predominantly been farmed and used to grow hay on for the last 115 years. You would see this cycle. Family members would grow crops on it. Charles' great-grandfather, I believe, had an entire vegetable garden on it, a truck garden, excuse me. It's had corn, everything you can imagine on it. And then as a generation would get older, they would often then plant it back into hay. And then it would transition to a younger generation and they would then farm it again. You see this continue over the last 115 years, but it has been continuously cultivated, irrigated, farmed, and managed as though it was private property since the family purchased the adjoining land in 1910.
Right. Okay. And so in your understanding, there was no concern, obviously.
Right. So for numerous reasons, we had no concerns. It went through 2 transitions of ownership. The U.S. Forest Service allotment did within Charles' family. And at that time, they can review and say, we have this, and this we need to get straightened out. That never occurred. So there was no issue in our minds to look at there. The FSA office, which is also under the umbrella of USDA, they called us the owners of the land to the fence line. And that is kind of a checks and balances under USDA. So when the FSA says that you are the owner and the Forest Service says the Forest Service's record showed the fence on them, but they had never indicated that it was more than a few feet off. So there was no reason for us to assume anything in our lifetime was amiss or there was an issue. And we had multiple ways of interacting with the government that told us that. So yeah, we had no indication there was a problem. And even when there was a problem, logically, when they sat down and talked to us the very first time on March 29th, 2024, you logically think in your head, that fence does have a curve to it. It doesn't run due north and south. So it is logical what this person is telling me that it may not be exactly on the line. But nobody, the Forest Service, the Maude family, had any idea if it was off a few inches or a few feet. And so we readily and willingly entered into the resolution process of let's figure out where the actual line is and let's fix this for both the agency and our family.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And so what took place? Were you able to use that land, which I know is key to your operation in 2024?
We had it planted to hay barley. I should give you a little bit of background. So our initial meeting with the Forest Service was unannounced. They came to our yard and asked to meet with us on March 29th. They said they had no reason to say we could or could not do what we were doing on this land and basically asked us to do some research and to reach out to our ranger, our district ranger, to determine A, is there an issue, and B, if there is one, let's resolve it. So we just continued on as we always had. And between March 29th and May 1st, we planted the entire field to hay barley. May 1st, when we met with our district ranger, Special Agent Lunders had some issues with the fact we had continued managing it. And I have recordings from that meeting where we explained to him, well, here is what was said March 29th. We had no indication there was an issue. Nobody even knows where the boundary line is. So we continued on. But from May 1st on, when he did actually indicate to us he would rather, again, nothing was ever said, you must stop, you are in the wrong. We have yet to receive any written or verbal confirmation from any member of the United States Forest Service that we did anything wrong. Still, I haven't received anything in writing. There were no notes or adjustments made to it. We signed our grazing permit for the year with 0 issues before we began the May 1st conversation on the fence line in question with no concerns. And that remains the case today. So,
Back
but
to
as of
Stranger Than Fiction.
Yeah. But as of May 1st, when Ranger Julie Wheeler and Special Agent Travis Lunder said, let's stop this until we get this figured out, we respected that. And we did not touch their side of the line that Special Agent Lunder surveyed on May 7th. We never touched their side of the line until we got a permanent change to our grazing permit put in place in July or August of this year. And so from May 1st of 2024 until like August of 2025, we did not touch their side of the line. And all we did to our adjoining private acres was harvest the hay barley crop. Mm-hmm. We didn't irrigate it. We didn't do any of what we would normally do because of the way in which this boundary is placed. The end of our pivot crosses onto it. So out of respect for the process, we chose to not operate it for that period of time. And that's very detrimental to our operation because this is our only irrigated ground and it is the feed base for our entire farm and ranch.
Okay. And 2024 was a dry year for you?
It was very dry. We had a decent hay year, and our friends and neighbors were very courteous in offering us the option to purchase feed.
Mm-hmm.
So 2024 worked out. It worked out all right, but I would say that is because of kind people, not because of it being a great year. 2025 started out really, really dry, and we got some rains mid to late summer, but we failed all of our grain crops this spring in our area, so we hayed all of those.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of what we've done this year, and we've purchased some additional feed that we normally wouldn't have to. And then in September, Charles was finally able to plant it, and we do have a forage winter wheat on it now.
Okay. And so that will be grazed then,
that's a good question. We utilize our Forest Service allotment that adjoins these private acres where this is occurring in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the question is, are we going to graze it or are we just going to hold it over for next year? And then you can hay some of it where it's a forage wheat, and this is my husband's department, not mine, but you can hay it or combine some of it, and it makes exceptional straw because it grows really tall compared to your standard winter wheat.
Okay.
We do have options.
It first and then harvest it in the spring. I know sometimes it's done with winter wheat, but I don't know if that's a South Dakota winter wheat plan or just Kansas.
Yeah, you can, and I don't know if we will graze it or not.
Right.
This winter. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, I guess tell me, maybe if you want to, who you feel was instrumental in achieving the outcome that I believe was what you had hoped for, which was obviously dropping the criminal charges, and then this purchase agreement, which is looks like kind of starting to close the chapter on this. I don't even know what word to use, but very ugly year and a half that you've been dealing with.
Yeah. We had a plethora of people, industry organizations, the world of agriculture backed us.
Mm-hmm.
Our neighbor, Scott Edoff, will say that my husband's the only guy that has gotten every agriculture organization in the state of South Dakota to agree on something. Mm-hmm. And we appreciate all of them. Their voices were loud. We had Senator Rounds come on board early, and his staff was, I think, instrumental in this on the political side, as was Representative Hageman out of Wyoming and her staff, because fence line issues are a very serious thing in Wyoming as well. I think less than 50% of fences are on boundary lines in that state. So her constituents certainly saw that as being very important and relevant, and she did as well. Karen Bud Phelan was a very large help to us. She is a great legal mind on land matters. So that those were kind of the people early on. I feel I am forgetting one. I'm probably forgetting to name several, but lots of others leading up to the criminal charge. And then, yes, we had an administration change in the midst of all of this.
Right.
And I know that hundreds, if not thousands of people sent former Secretary Tom Vilsack letters about our situation. And the most anyone received back was basically an automated reply. Immediately, almost within beginning her job as Secretary of Agriculture, Rollins was made aware of our issue. And in April of 2025, she reached out, and not directly, but she indirectly requested my information on our history and our use of this land. And so it was just night and day from one administration that ignored it completely and just continued to act like it never even happened, to the Trump administration and Secretary Rollins found this issue and immediately began responding and requesting additional information. And then Brett Tolman called and asked me about it and was willing to come on and assist us as our attorney. And then we found out that he knew Secretary Rollins. And so that really expedited the situation. So that was really instrumental, and we call those God things in our world. But he came on and he knew her, and that all happened about a week after I was asked to send her a whole bunch of information regarding our situation. And so that really expedited us up to getting the criminal charges dropped. And everybody asks, isn't that a huge deal? And yes, it is and was. But in a lot of ways, I think that getting to this point of resolution is an even bigger deal. We all know we're the fifth generation of my husband's family to be blessed to run this place. You ask anybody in agriculture, what's more important, the place or my personal safety or security, right? That was about our personal safety and security. And while it's undescribable how happy I am not going to prison. I am so relieved that the amount of stress that is coming off as we get this purchase agreement, and that we know that my husband and hopefully my children, and God willing, my grandchildren someday, are going to be able to manage and love and care for this land the same way that my husband's family has for 5 generations. That is, that is equally as important. And a lot of people who aren't involved directly in production agriculture don't understand that. And that was really hard. You're ending this criminal thing and you're like, I am sincerely and utterly thankful for everything that has occurred to this point, and I am so relieved I am not going to prison. But we aren't done. And from our perspective, the land is as important. And a lot of people didn't understand that, but some did. And now here we sit this week getting that purchase agreement was just such a huge deal, because our land is a part of us, and I saw them try to remove my husband from that land. That's a part of who he is. And just really grateful for the administration, for Secretary Rollins, for Chief Schultz of the U.S. Forest Service, for all of these people behind the scenes, all of these organizations, these elected officials that have continued to help us get to this point, because this is the family legacy, and we are a prime example of American agriculture. And to see that sustained and preserved is a very, very big deal, personally and on a big scale.
And to me, it just makes me think in, that could be compared in some ways to many people's story in agriculture, not the same situation as you, but outside factors removing or making their ability to survive or be profitable, affecting them greatly. I mean, things, whether that is the market or the weather or, many other things, not maybe quite as personal as yours. Well,
Yeah.
definitely not as personal as what you're going through. But yet I feel like maybe people can relate in the aspect of what you said is what I hear from ranchers every time I interview one, almost, that we love the land, we love being able to do this with our families, and we just want the opportunity to make a living without being interfered with.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, in a lot of ways, you're being looked at as a spokesman for the ranching industry for a variety of reasons, but I think that's a big one, is just the fact that we see your family wanting to make a living, working hard, doing everything right from the viewpoint of agriculture, and somebody, unfortunately it was the government, stepped in and tried to stop that. And so we can sympathize in some ways with that. All of us can, I think.
Right. Yep.
So tell me, I don't want to get off the subject of the purchase agreement. If there's more to be talked about on that, I guess I should ask you. I think that's a good look for our listeners probably, but
I think so. At this time, that's all I know is we've just received it. We're in the process of reviewing it. I
Okay.
think it's pretty standard and straightforward, and me reading through it the first time. So I think that part's pretty cut and dried. I don't anticipate any major issues there. Do you want me to go into where we're going to go from there?
Yes. Yes, please.
So once that is done and we complete the resolution component of that, then I hope the last part of this is how do we respond to the fact that the U.S. Forest Service unnecessarily brought criminal felony charges against us without practicing due process, without any intent on our part to commit a crime. And we have had lots of people, lots of attorneys very interested in helping us with that and how we respond. I know we met with attorneys after the press conference in Washington, D.C. and said, you could sue the USDA, the Forest Service, and the individual players involved numerous ways each. And that isn't our first choice.
Mm-hmm.
We would like assurances that we can continue to farm and ranch in this location for another 115 years, God willing, without fear of having this occur again. And so we have expressed that, and we have had conversations with what we would like to see happen in response to that. And so it's very critical that people are aware it's not over when the resolution is done, but I'm hopeful it can be rather effective and efficient, and that our voices have been heard on that, and we are able to proceed in the settlement that we've proposed. We aren't telling what it is publicly at this time, but we appreciate everyone that's followed along to this point. We would appreciate you continuing to follow along as we try to just resolve this, in a manner that gives our family the assurance that we won't face this again. And, God willing, that's the way it goes, and we don't have to pursue any cases, bring any charges against any entities to get that resolved.
Okay. Well, and I think one concern then again from the industry is obviously, are we going to be next? Especially if there's an administration change again, or, at some point there will be. So one question would be, do you know anything on the people that caused this to happen to you? Travis Lenders, possibly your ranger, Julie Wheeler. Do we know? I know you and I have discussed this at times. Has there been any assurances that you've heard recently on their whereabouts, their job security, those issues?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's one I have. It's one of the most frustrating components of this is that I have to tell you that I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's right. Not because it's me, but because I don't think it's right that government employees, whomever all was involved in this, are able to accomplish what they did. And that I sit here on the other side of having criminal charges dropped and nobody is capable of telling me what the status is there. I don't think that's right when a citizen has something like what's occurred to me happen. And then I think it's a very logical question to ask, where are these individuals? What are they doing? Can they still impact my life? And to just be given blank stares. So,
right. And not only your life, I mean, just transferring them outside of your region might, in theory, protect you. But,
yeah. And that's the only thing we have heard. We know that the forest supervisor, Jack Isaacs, conveniently retired without notice the day after our press conference in Washington, D.C. And he was the highest ranking management side of the U.S. Forest Service in our area when the criminal charges were brought against us. We had a regional forester, but he had not relocated from Washington, D.C. to the Denver office and actually physically began operations when we were indicted criminally. So the highest ranking person in the U.S. Forest Service at that time retired the day after that. And then I'm told you can't touch them. The USDA did conduct an internal review of Special Agent Lunders and Ranger Julie Wheeler's actions regarding our situation. I found that really interesting, and we willingly participated. We've willingly participated in this entire thing. I question why wasn't the Office of Oversight, or why wasn't the CIA or a true third party brought in to conduct an actual investigation against these employees' actions? Because I just question, and I don't know the cause. Maybe they did, and maybe Secretary Rollins had specific purposes for asking for an internal review. I'm not privy to that knowledge, but I just thought it interesting that what came to me was an internal review team comprised of 3 USDA employees. We met with them for 3 hours, and I don't know, it was very good. They were very professional. They were very courteous toward us. They did say that the law enforcement side of the Forest Service was very pleased and happy with Special Agent Lunders. And at another time in there, they stated that the Forest Service has been really upset with how negative the press was about them during the time in which they were bringing the criminal charges against Charles and I. And so I found that quite interesting, that we seem to have some people in there that are now, since they didn't get their desired outcome, are attempting to play the victim mentality thing where they are not responsible for their actions. It was completely kind of brushed aside that I was unable to speak to the press. My husband was unable to speak to the press. The press said a great many things that were inaccurate and or unkind toward us as well. And apparently those are irrelevant. But it was worth noting to the people sitting where I sat in that internal review interview that members of the U.S. Forest Service had their feelings hurt by what the press said. And so I pointed out that perhaps the scope and perception that they were presented of Agent Lunders and Ranger Wheeler were not all encompassing enough to result in a quality review.
Right.
And suggested they should reach out to, say, maybe some of our friends and neighbors, people that worked with them. And I don't mean people that just had negative experiences with them, but I mean people in their district that had worked with them over the years. And they kind of said, no, that's okay. And then we actually took them down to the river bottom, to the site. And one thing we showed them was a cottonwood tree, because in April of 2025, our attorneys got an email that said that the Forest Service would be conducting survey-like activities in the general area of our Forest Service permit. And I was like, that's handy. And I told my attorney, we all know what that means. And so we went to observe this on our private property, overlooking where they were doing this. And when we showed up, Special Agent Lunders went behind this tree for over an hour. And then after they left, we went down to see what they had done. And the internal review team also asked me if I could verify that it was U.S. Forest Service employees, because they were told the BLM was involved in the survey. And my response to that is, I don't believe that Department of Interior, which is what the BLM is under, would put USDA stakes in. And all of the stakes that these survey crews put in are USDA stakes. So anyway, we assumed they were all USDA employees, but we looked behind this tree, and Special Agent Lunders had piled up a whole bunch of sticks and had peeled a whole bunch of bark off of it. And at that time, the internal review team said, yes, I would appreciate the names and numbers of your friends and neighbors that have interacted as well. Sent those to him, and I got every kind of response in the book from my friends and neighbors and acquaintances and people that just reached out when we were going to criminal court. We had people reach out with their own experiences, willing to come and testify. And they all got quite a myriad of experiences and responses from this internal review team. And now we're getting third hand here, but I was told, Travis Lunders has been fired. He is going to be moved to a new district. To one man was told that we ranchers were actually the problem, and we ruined 2 good Forest Service employees' careers, but they weren't going anywhere. So I heard that third hand, but I heard it from 2 different people. So it just remains really inconsistent what we hear. And I think that's a problem. And I'm not saying that I do think, like the Secretary of Agriculture, the Chief of the Forest Service, I think when they're made aware of these things, they are doing everything they can to fix them. Right. But there's still a great deal of bureaucracy between the people and the high level government officials that cause some ongoing problems for all of us.
And the more transparency is always better.
It is. Yep.
Whether it's government or not. I mean, but especially government, we as citizens deserve to know who's working in our areas for the government. That's should be basic knowledge that is available to us. And
Yep.
yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Okay, very interesting. Um, wow. um, so yeah, I guess any other future information that you know of, or plans that would affect you, that you're being talked to from the Forest Service or anything like that?
Not that I am aware of. Our interaction with the Forest Service has been exclusively with Chief Schultz or our regional forester, Troy Heithecker. They're very busy. We are very busy, so we haven't communicated a lot. We are winter allotment users, so what we have always done is once we finish preg checking and get an actual head count on our number of cows, we reach out to them with, here is how many AUMs we have, and then they go through and determine how many days we can graze our Forest Service allotment. And so for us, that is coming up here in the next 1 to 2 weeks to get that information to them. But that is standard operating procedures. Oh, I don't anticipate issues there, but
Usual.
is one thing we have coming up.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't want to answer this, that's okay. So, but just for my curiosity, um, with your purchase agreements, was there anything done with the land that the Forest Service manages, the mod land that the Forest Service manages, that's fenced in with theirs?
So if our purchase agreement goes through as we anticipate it will, that will then take care of that, because one of these lots borders that land of ours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a giant C. We own the C, and then the inner part of the C is what we are about to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was that lower part of the C that was fenced in with the Forest Service.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this will rectify any of those issues with that fence as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I guess I don't anticipate any additional
So it's not
issues.
a swap of like your private land goes into their ownership, and right, because that.
Right. So that was one option we presented in May of 2024
Mm-hmm.
when we met with Ranger Wheeler, was that we trade our private acres on their side of the fence for their acres on our side of the fence, and then whoever needed to wrote the other a check for the difference, and we all just went on. And that, after everything we've gone through, that was no longer something I was interested in doing.
Okay.
And it really doesn't. It's a very difficult area. You have a river, you have an 1800s original survey that you're trying to deal with. We're a long way from the corner of the section they begin the survey, and you have a lot of natural barriers. So it is a tough area to survey. And so I think cleaning this up, I feel like this is, sorry,
No, you're good.
cleaning this. I feel like cleaning this up in the manner that we have is exactly why the Small Tracts Act was created, to clean up these small parcels that are difficult to access, that are just a few acres, and that, say in our case, we own on 3 sides of them, and there's a river on the 4th side. So to me, this was a classic reason for the creation of the Small Tracts Act. It cleans up this small little number of acres. They're 2 government lots, just abnormal government lots. So I do think this is actually the best course of action, and I am really grateful for the administration and the chief of the Forest Service recognizing that and now willingly working with us to make that become a reality.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I think that sounds great. That's what was my expectation of how you were going to explain it, but I
Okay.
had to satisfy my own curiosity there. But
Yeah.
yeah, very good. What am I forgetting to ask you about?
Um, it's, I don't, A lot of people ask what we want to do when this is over, and we would just really like our lives to get back to normal, whatever that may mean. Certainly been enlightening. The Lord has certainly refined us through this process. And, we also look forward to, if we're given the opportunity, being one of these sources of knowledge on Western states and ranching issues going forward. We've met a lot of highly intelligent people in all levels of government. Not a lot of us ranchers go that route. And so we recognize a need for our knowledge. And I think they recognize a need for going to the people for the knowledge in the areas they don't know. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but I look forward to it if it does. And Charles really looks forward to not having to do very many more interviews in his entire life.
His lifetime quota.
Yep. I've almost maxed him out. He doesn't know it, but he's never going to be completely done. Other than that, we remain so thankful to our industry, to people such as yourself that have, took this on and covered it both before we could speak and continue to follow it now that we can. And just everyone that recognized that while we may have been the face of this was an issue that could have impacted our entire industry in a really negative way. And we're just really thankful for the way it's going at this point. And we're really thankful for an administration that is willing to work with us. And we really hope to just be able to wrap this up and truly we would really like to be a success story versus a failure that we so often read about when these things occur. And so it's just really encouraging to be in a position for the first time in a year and a half where it feels like that is legitimately an option that's going to happen.
Right. Absolutely. One thing I should ask you about, which is a little more current, I'm sure you saw that in the new USDA plan, there does include some hopefully, a return to more grazing on federal lands, some allotments that have been closed and things like that. Your thoughts on that in general, being yourself a user of federal lands?
Yeah. I'm a very firm believer that one of our top priorities as a nation should be a secure food supply. So the first and most useful use of these lands is grazing. Mm-hmm. It's a phenomenal thing that we are able to then utilize them for a myriad of other things, for recreation and hunting, which is another way that many families feed themselves. Mm-hmm. But first and foremost, grazable land should be used to produce high quality food for our nation and world. And so I am encouraged to see this. It is a necessary thing. It is, as we have reduced grazing on our public lands, we have seen so many negative and costly things, this influx of large scale fires, and we see this reduction in the US cow herd. And it isn't, public lands aren't everywhere, but I had a conversation with someone earlier today, and they run hundreds of head of cattle because of a grazing allotment. Mm-hmm. That is what enables them in their instance to ranch. So it's critical, and it's encouraging to see the administration recognize that. And hopefully as they go forward and see the positive impacts, we see more of it. I don't understand why we have retired allotments that don't have livestock on them. That does not make sense to me. I was unaware of that until just recently. There were some people I know that were displaced by a fire this summer, and they were able to go to an unused allotment. I don't understand why we have unused allotments, like how that is not beneficial to society to have land that can grow food that is sitting idle in that way, and then inevitably costs our taxpayer dollars when it catches on fire or in some other way needs maintenance. So
I was going to say, even changing the landscape of the range and the forages that are available, and when they aren't grazed, they tend to be devalued in some way, like you said, either fire or they die out, or
encroachment of woody species, any number of things. We have lots of great research that shows that grazing is very beneficial to the landscape.
Right. Use
Plus,
a
it,
renewable resource. I mean, I think that's something people forget, that
yes,
it's using a renewable resource to produce something useful that
yes,
comes back again next year or this fall
yep,
or, whatever the case is that.
yep. The production of food and fiber is critical for the success of our nation as a whole. And so I am thrilled to see them acknowledge that.
Hmm. Yep. I think that's really interesting too. And like you said, I wasn't aware either that I knew that there had been some retiring and, um, you know, retiring isn't the word. Some of them they said are just being, held up or whatever,
Yeah.
different allotments, but it's a lot worse than what I had realized. And so,
Well, yeah. And we see some, I'm not going to be able to pull all the names out of the top of my head right now, but there is currently some members of Congress who are trying to formulate a plan where you can retire your grazing allotments and ensure they are never grazed again. And they say for the benefit of the ranch or the wildlife and the public. And it's a, the fight for our way of life is never going to go away.
mhm,
And so, and we've always heard those voices. So it's just really nice to see what I perceive to be a voice of reason at the USDA, recognizing what all of us out here living it have known and have always known, which is that there is no value to allowing them to set idle.
right, right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been really interesting to watch too. So, in a good way,
Yeah.
to see the secretary picking up these issues and moving forward with them. And so, yeah, well, I think that might kind of cover the gamut of what I had hoped to ask you about. And I know you need to pick up kids here soon too. And so,
Yes. Well, thank you for having me on.
well, thank you very much for your time.